my favorite way is one of the simplest ways, which is to use the geometry of the rig as a starting point. The reason I like this is it makes sure that the clothing will follow properly. So I'll talk about that in just a little bit here. But the main thing, and as I'm doing this, I should actually open the rig. Whenever you're creating mods for a rig, it's always a good idea to open the rig, not import it, not reference it. So you import it, make the modification, then save that out as a new file. This gives you more control and avoids some potentially weird issues. So the way I'm going to attach this is I'm not going to use anything like Cloth Sim. Cloth Sim is great. I love Cloth Sim, but it's a long process, and oftentimes you only do that at the very, very, very end of your animation. You wouldn't do it at the start of the animation. So it's also time consuming, which is not something I want when I'm animating. I want something that I can just start working with and get something looking good. I don't want to have to spend a ton of time just trying to get simulation working. So for example, this shirt the character has, there's no cloth sim. It just follows the body. Wherever he moves, the shirt moves with him. Okay, how do we do that? Well, first let me just hide the controls and make sure that I can select his geometry. So I can select his geometry now, and I'm just going to hide all of the controls like so. If you're in Maya 2020, the shortcut for that is Alt-1. That'll hide all the NURBS curves. Okay, so let's take off his shirt here. We're gonna make him a new shirt. So we're gonna hide the old one, and let's say I want to start modeling a shirt. Well, I could try to do it from scratch. That can work, and there's no problem with that, but it takes a long time, and unless you know what you're doing, you start getting into topology issues. It's just kind of a pain. So instead, what I like to do is I'll use the existing geometry from the rig and use that to create a new object. So for example, I'm going to take his body here, I'm going to duplicate it, and now we get this kind of default mannequin body here. Okay, well, I want to make a shirt. So with this new body, I know that I don't need the lower half. So let's just take everything down below here and delete that. I don't need another head. So if I was animating or creating a turtleneck, I would just select the faces higher up here like that. So we could get something like a turtleneck. If I wanted a t-shirt, I would delete it lower down. And what kind of sleeves do we want? Well, let's say I want to do kind of let's do a semi-long sleeve. So a little past the elbows, but not all the way down to the wrists. So maybe like right around there. So we could delete that like so. And I could do two different sleeves. So one's a little longer, one's a little shorter if I wanted to. In this case, we'll kind of keep them the same. So like so. And this gives us our template to start working off of. What's important with this is when you have geometry that you want to create into a shirt and attach it to a rig using what's called a wrap deformer. This is how shirts and things are attached, and same thing with the pants here. The way that they deform and follow the body is that they look at the vertice information. So it'll compare the vertices on the body to the vertices on the shirt and then try to keep them in line with each other. Now, if we create a shirt whose vertices don't match the body, so for example, I just make just a simple cube and put it on, and the vertices don't really follow the edge flow on the rig, it can run into an issue where it's trying to calculate and you start getting weird deformations. The closer you get to the original, so by duplicating it, we get pretty much spot on, the more it'll follow directly. So by using this as a base, we get a shirt that we will have a lot of control over. Or I should say that we're going to not have to worry about deformations as much. Do you have to do it this way? No, it's just a good way to start. So the first thing I'm going to do here is let's actually make it a shirt color. So I'm just going to assign a new material to it. So I'm just going to add a Lambert and let's give him a red shirt. So just give us a nice reddish color. Something like that. There we go. Now it's starting to look a little bit more like a turtleneck. So with this, let's put it back into place, and we run into an issue. It's still skin tight. This is like the ultimate like superhero leotard. It is just form-fitting to his body, so much so that it's actually just in his body. We need to expand it out. We want some thickness to this shirt. Maybe it's a little bit more of a sweater versus a skin-tight jumpsuit. We have some issues. One is if I just scale it, you're going to see the scaling doesn't really work right. The pivot point's not in the right spot, and even if I did move the pivot point into the right spot, it's going to get these weird moments where some things intersect and it's just not going to work correctly. So I need a way to expand this shirt out. Just kind of puff it out per point. Not globally, but per point. The way I like to do that is if you just select the vertices on the shirt, you can switch your component mode, or sorry, your manipulator, I should say, from object, which is it normally is, or world, and switch it to component. What this means is that the vertices will line, or the manipulator, I should say, will line up to the each individual component of the shirt. And let's see. Let's actually do it with the scale. So now, if I set this to component here and scale this up, it should scale from each individual point. I can center the pivot. Actually, let's show that. So if I center the pivot, so modify, center pivot, and we'll just scale normally. Boop. You'll see that, again, it doesn't scale exactly how we want. It's scaling from a point, but we want it to expand outwards. It should be scaling on the arms, from the center of the arms out, from the body out, from the neck out, not from one central point. So this, it just doesn't work. Now, if I select my components here, let's see. Or actually, was it vertex normal? I always forget. Let's try this. No. Actually, let me double check something here. Okay, perfect. So what I need is to pull it out based on its actual elements. So let's see. I'm going to forget. I thought it was component, but I could be wrong on that. Yeah. So let's go into our scale and try this. If I scale this out, that's not working. What was it again? I always forget. Because if I do this, let's zero that shape out. Oh wait, I think I know what it is. So yeah, same issue. I think it's the faces that I need to select. Now my brain is... I'm doubting myself. What was it? Like the vertices. And then it was... Wait a second. I know what's... My 2020 switch things. That's why. Okay. Normal, that's it. Aha. There we go. So yeah, that's the problem. Maya changed things in the newer versions. And it used to be right over here on the right side. It's actually now, if you select this, so once again, I'll select the vertices, select all of them, Control Shift, right click, go to Axis, and you want to choose Normal. So what this does is it allows you to move the points not based on the object, but on each individual normal. The normal of an object, or a vertice in this case, is the direction that it points outwards or inwards, or whichever direction. So with this, I can just find the normal that pulls it out, and right there. See how now it's just kind of puffing it out in every direction. The sleeves are just expanding, the neck is expanding, the body's expanding, just like that. So you just want to find the normal in there. And now, that's a little too puffy. I'm looking at the neck there. That's a very thick sweater there. I can just pull this out, and we've got depth. Voila. So, took a little while to find there, but we did find it. Okay, great. We've got that. Well, at this point, I can start modeling the shapes that I want. And instead of having to start from scratch, we've got the basic form of the clothing in place. I can just tweak stuff to make it a little bit more interesting. So for example, if I want this to be a little bit more of a baggy shirt, well, we don't need this big pectoral area to be so prominent. We could maybe soften that up so it kind of feels like maybe he's not quite as muscular, or the shirt's a little bit more loose fitting. Now, you could do this just by moving vertices, or what I like to do is I will go to the sculpting tools in Maya, and I'm just going to use these. So for example, I could use the smooth brush. I'm going to turn on symmetry. So let's turn on X symmetry, so that way I can do both sides at the same time. I'm just going to smooth out the detail right there on the shirt. So you'll notice that we get a little geometry poking through. Well, I can just grab my grab tool. So right there, pull that back out. Let's smooth it a little bit more. Now, the way I'm changing my brush size is just hold down B and middle mouse drag. You're going to be able to change that brush size. I could use the relax tool to kind of, it just relaxes the vertices, kind of evens them out a little bit. So we've got that there a little bit better. If I wanted to, I could maybe use the sculpt tool. Let's turn off symmetry here and just kind of add, maybe not so big. I'm not going to be able to add a ton of detail, but I could just kind of pull out some detail through here if I wanted to add some wrinkles or some forms. Honestly, for clothing like this, I try to keep it as simple as possible. The more you start trying to sculpt it, it starts to look weird. But now we get less of that chest detail. It kind of looks like a thicker sweater versus a skin tight, like muscle suit. Okay, what else can we do? Well, we could add some detail if we wanted to. Actually, one thing I should fix is right here, that neck. We really feel that divot right in there. That's a sure sign that this is a skin tight muscle suit. So let's take our smooth tool, turn on our symmetry again, and let's just smooth that out. Get rid of that Adam's apple. Right in there. There we go. So it doesn't take long. It's just quick little tweaks on there. Now that feels a little better. So what if I want to make the sleeves feel like they're a little rolled up? Well, for that I can just take some of the faces here and I'll just extrude them. So I can add some geometry. As long as I'm not going overboard with it, we can just quickly add a little bit of shape to that. I could even take the sleeves. You can see how they're kind of too big. Well, let's actually do this before we extrude. I can take the vertices on the ends of the sleeves here, and I'm going to move them with normals and just suck that back in just a little bit, like so. So this way we still get that puffiness in the rest of the body, so it looks thick, but by the sleeves, and we could do the same thing with the neck, it just starts to taper in a little bit more, so that when we add the extrusions here, it just feels like it's connected to his body just a little bit more. And we could do the same for the neck. It's all the same. We could even do it on the bottom of his waist here. So if I want to make it feel like he's got like his shirt kind of folded up and rolled up at the bottom, extrude that, pull that out. Now you want to be careful, like if you have pants, you don't want to intersect them in a weird way. So I could kind of do that and then maybe taper this in just a little bit. So let's get my scale tool. And do I have an extra vertice selected somewhere? Interesting. Oh, it's because I have symmetry turned on. Okay. Scale that in, and we get something like that. Okay. So we're starting to make our little Christmas sweater. Okay. Let's say at this point we can just do whatever we want. I could add a little pocket to his shirt, whatever. If I have to, I can adjust the geometry and kind of move things around. Faces don't have to stay exactly where they are. This is just a way to get it close enough to the body so we really don't have to worry about too much deformation. But let's say this is pretty good. We've got it where we want it to be. We now need to attach it to the body. To do this, you'll want to select the body, then the shirt. I always get this mixed up, but I believe it's the body, then the shirt. Go to deform, and you want to create a wrap deformer. A wrap deformer is basically going to wrap the clothing onto the body and make it move with the body. The only thing I recommend here is making sure that exclusive bind is turned on. What that does is you can actually wrap one object, so a shirt, to multiple other objects, which is really cool because it'll deform based on multiple things. But usually with clothing, we're only attaching it to the body. So by turning on exclusive bind, it makes it attached to just one thing, and it removes a bunch of extra calculations. It makes things run a little faster. And I think I got it backwards. I always get it backwards. Okay. So shirt, then body, wrap deformer. Okay. Usually the thing that's wrapped should be the last thing selected. So right here it's highlighted. So let's see if that worked. Move the arm. Haha! Our new custom shirt moves with the body, and we're not getting any clipping or any weirdness. And that's because we built it based on the original design of the character. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but the closer we get, the more leeway we have to avoid these little weird issues. So that's about it. That's how I design clothing for characters. And you could add a seam to the front here to make like the feeling that there's buttons. You could make it a vest. You could add extra detail. So for example, here you can see there's a seam right here on the inside of the pants here. Let's actually do that with the clothing. So I'm going to undo the wrap. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to take the edge right through here all the way down. Maybe this edge here and this edge here. Where else would we have a seam? Maybe along... I don't really have a good seam around the neck here, so I'm going to ignore that for now. But right along those edges there. Okay, we've got all of that. I'm just going to bevel that edge, like so. Let's make it just a little thinner. And then I'm going to take the face within that all the way through. And then I'm going to extrude that and just push it down ever so slightly. So, dip just a little bit. Like that. Now, we get a seam. Done. Now, you could add that around the arms too. I probably should have done that around the arm as well to get that seam that you usually get right there on the clothing. You could do all sorts of things. Add pockets, add little ruffles, whatever. But it gets you that starting point. And then once again, select the clothing, then the skin, deform, wrap, and everything follows. Done. So that's pretty much it. Not too much. It's pretty simple. Now, how would you go about adding text or a picture to the clothes? All you would need to do is add a texture to it. Now, keep in mind that the more modifications you make to this, the more you might have to UV something. So because I took the original rig and created something new out of it, if I actually open up my UV editor, you can see that the UVs are actually in place for the most part. So I would just have to add an image, a texture on here, and I could get that image right in place. So you can see, kind of like that. If I created this just from scratch, these UVs would be a mess, and I would have to make it all by hand. All the UVs by hand. So that's how you'd actually just put an image. Now, there's a question here. Do I prefer using bump or normal maps for wrinkles? It depends on the size of the wrinkle. If it's mostly just kind of to feel a difference, I will use bump. So bump is great for like slight texture, little things that actually don't deform the geometry. So for example, let's say I just want this like subtle cloth texture feeling in there. I'll use a bump map. If I want a wrinkle, so for example, I get this wrinkle here. You can see how that wrinkle cuts across the chest there, but it also, if my hair wasn't in the way, it bumps the surface up. If you look at the silhouette, you can feel that going up there. If ever I'm going to start noticing those, I will use a normal map, because a normal map will actually displace the geometry versus just creating the illusion of displacement. So that is going to be my usual defining factor, is how much of a change do I see on the actual surface. Now, by any chance, will you be going over how to make shoes in this demo? Probably not. Shoes are pretty much the same thing. Although with shoes, I will usually just make them from scratch. So I don't copy the foot geometry, mostly because if you actually look at the foot geometry, and where's my manipulator? There we go. It really just doesn't match what a shoe looks like. There's toes, there's all sorts of extra things. Shoes are the case where I'll just make something by myself. I'll just model it myself. It's easier, typically. You can just create the sole, create the cloth or leather over top, and that's pretty much it. It really just comes down to modeling techniques. And we kind of covered that in the last stream where we were doing the skateboard. Yeah, and the same wrap deformer would go on here. So these shoes are being controlled by a wrap deformer. Wonder if we can actually see the wrap deformer here. No. But these are actually being controlled by a wrap deformer. Most clothing on rigs is controlled by a wrap deformer. So for example here, if I do that, it's a wrap deformer that's adjusting the shoe itself. You just do a little bit more modeling. And honestly, you could model a shirt from scratch if you wanted to. You don't have to use the geometry of the rig. The big thing is that you're going to have to UV it afterwards, and you want to make sure that the detail is enough that you're not going to get weird issues. So let's actually show that just as a demo here. Let's say I'm just going to create a piece of cloth that's going to wrap around the character's chest here. Very slight. So I'm going to create this piece of cloth here. Going to sit on the character's chest. And let's tone down our detail here. So 3 and 3. Yeah. So I'm just going to take these, move them back. This is maybe like a he's going to a fancy restaurant. He's tucking the napkin into his shirt kind of thing. Or in this case, just pinning it to his naked body, which is just weird. Why is he doing this? Where is he going? What is the dress code of this place? Okay, so let's do this. So in this example, we have a shirt, we'll call this a shirt, that has been placed onto it. Maybe it's a piece of armor. Actually, let's go with that. It's a piece of armor that's going across him, and we modeled it, but our amount of detail doesn't really match up with the body. And let me actually close the UV editor so we don't keep seeing that texture in there. Okay, so let's wrap that to the body. So take the cloth or the clothing, then the body, go to deform, wrap. Okay, with this, you can see that it moves with the body. But because there's so little detail in here, it doesn't take much before the body just starts clipping through. It doesn't have enough detail to round the shape out and to conform with the changes in the rig. So I would either have to add a lot more detail or match it to the base rig, which is why we duplicated it to begin with. It's just a different workflow. It gets you that start. Yeah, so I could create more subdivisions, but even then, sometimes depending on the rig, especially like in places like the arms or the armpit, anywhere that there's a lot of pinching and changes that go in there, sometimes you have to really put that amount of detail, that the subdivisions, super high not to get any little deformations, which then also means it's putting the deformation detail super high everywhere else, unless you're really watching your edge loops and all of that. It's just a pain. It'll either make it so that you still get little areas that stick through, or you're going to get weird deformations, or it's just going to be so heavy that it's going to slow everything down. Or you can just start with what the rig gives you and build from there, and it matches pretty closely. So creating shoes from scratch is easier due to how the feet don't have much detail. Well, it's not so much that they don't have as much detail. In many ways they have more because we have the toes and everything. But feet don't usually have that much twist and pinching that happen. So for example, when I raise my arm, all of this is pinching in to the neck. I'm pinching my arm into my neck. If I put my hand here and come down, now it's pinching again. There's not really a point like that on the ankle unless you're making a boot that goes up high and you're really cranking that foot up like this. But even then, it's the foot and leg is kind of just a tube. So there's not that much complex, no complex forms. Even though the detail in the foot is still complex, we've got the toes and all of that, we don't have to worry about the deformation being complex. So it tends to be easier just to shape it ourselves. As long, again, as you have the amount of detail. If I have this shoe and I just have like 2 faces in there, it's not going to be enough. I need to make it high enough detail that it'll deform with the foot. So yeah, that's pretty much making clothes for rigs. This is my usual go-to. It's super quick. You can make decently nice outfits really close or really quickly and make some variation in your characters.